or she has a lot of money that she's not letting on to, which I could see that the Forsaken themselves would have access to great wealth because lots of them are thousands of years old. The idea that they would not be amassing wealth is ridiculous.
Yeah, and also we know later on that there are dark friends within the upper class of Kyrian, so she could have any dark friend she wants as a benefactor, it seems
Well,
like.
yeah, and at some level they answer to her.
Right. I wonder if they tithe, like
Oh my
the dark
gosh.
friend to Lanfear tithing.
I gotta say, like, if she's not doing it, she should have been. What's a
Absolutely.
little racketeering and extortion at this point?
That's, again, that's nothing for a Forsaken. Help boost this video by giving it a like, and to not miss out on other coverage, make sure you're subscribed. Hello and welcome back to the channel. I am back with Laura, and we are on our rewatch of The Wheel of Time, episode 3. Laura, where would you like to start out this week?
Ooh, let's do this again and just get my buddy Matt out of the way.
I knew you were gonna come hard for Matrim this week. I knew it.
You know, part of the disdain I have for Matt is really well highlighted in this episode. When he wakes up, Leandrin's just sitting there. He makes like a little jape about her watching him sleep, which in some ways was pretty funny, but he realizes the door's open. And, you know, this leads to him and Min kind of running off together. But before that happens, Leandrin's like, Egwene could use you right now. And she needs a friend, and gives him the chance to prove himself. And he literally does exactly what she reads him down for. And I got to tell you, Leandrin's read down of Matt was crushing.
It was crushing.
But then we literally watch him see Egwene sobbing, and he's like, ugh, this makes me uncomfortable. I gotta go.
Yeah, Matt is a deeply flawed individual. The books, in a way, Matt does some things, says some things in the first couple books. First 2 books, I would say, that are like, makes you feel a certain way.
Right.
But I thought it was interesting on this rewatch looking at it because, and for people who are just joining, we've seen the whole series. This is going to talk about probably the whole series, so spoiler warning for this season. Later, we find out that Min has seen this premonition of Matt, and she later in the series tells him, like, I saw what you did. Matt doesn't want to know. He doesn't want to face it. And it's him stabbing Rand. And I have to wonder if Leandrin knows about the premonition that Min had. And because Leandrin is a dark friend, she's part of the Black Aja, if one of her, you know, like her mission was to make sure that Matt ends up where Rand is in proximity to him so that he can do what the premonition was said to do. Or if when she later takes Egwene, Nynaeve, and Elaine out to meet the Shan-Chen, if there was a possibility that her opening the hatch and letting Matt out to comfort Egwene would lead to some type of collective trust so that she could get all 4 of them on the road and en route to the location she needed them all to be in. Which later we have some goons who kind of just, I think they just knock Matt out and then like drop him off with Ishii
I mean,
later.
I feel like that's a really easy way to get it done with Matt.
Right?
Like,
because he's so unpredictable.
well, not just that, but I mean, he hasn't exactly proven himself to be
team player,
sharpest wit, best plans, most logical. Like, I don't know, right now he seems like the vibes of the group. Like, he just brings vibes.
He's the personality hire. Yeah. I'm really curious to see what season 3 has in store for Matt because I feel like
I'm trying to give him a chance.
I know. I know. I just feel like next season has to be a little bit more suited to getting people to come around on Matt. And I know like the end of this season, the whole Heroes of the Horn thing, he affirms like, hey, like I can do something good, like I can be honorable in this way. And
Yeah, but I'm not totally convinced that one moment of honor means that he's an honorable person.
right, and I think that's the difficulty stemming from season 1. Wherever the Barney Harris actor went, we don't know, can only speculate, but
Oh yeah,
him leaving the show really just made that Matt plotline difficult, I feel like.
Well, he brought such a different energy from the new actor too.
I've heard people say that Barney Harris is perfect for early Matt and Donald Finn is perfect for later seasons Matt. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that.
So Donald Finn seems to kind of more embody the Matt that you've told me about from the books.
Yeah.
And
a little bit more playful.
Yeah, more playful, less like dark triad personality.
Yeah.
But I am interested to see like how Min's abilities impact his storyline as we go forward.
Yeah, that's another good question too, because Min has such a small role in this season. I can really only make guesses as what, like, how she's brought in as one of the main players.
Well, we do see that like she's a double agent technically. Mm-hmm. Like she was planted in the cell next to him. We find that out right at the end of this episode where she's like, hey, hold the horse, BRB, gotta grab something. And then she like is having this whole conversation with Liandrin, and that's where we really see like this is all a giant ruse. This is nothing about this is just like Liandrin's like, okay, I'm done with you. This is just the next phase of Liandrin's plan.
It kind of makes me like Liandrin even more though, that she had concocted this whole drama off-Broadway show just for Matt.
I really appreciate how many like moving parts she has going with her plan.
Yeah, pretty impressive. But I think next week is phase 2 of Liandrin's plan. It'll be fun to get to that point. It will be. So where would you like to go next?
I was thinking maybe we could talk about Perrin and LaShawn Chen, and by default, we're going to talk about Ishii.
What part? Okay, so I'm going to guess. I'm going to go out on a limb that your favorite part was Ishii's meeting with Perrin.
Yes, absolutely. How could you not enjoy Ishii's performance in that? But like, I think one of the things that really stands out to me about Perrin's story in this episode specifically is his continued confrontation with violence and leadership. It's that theme that we keep coming back to that he's still like struggling to make heads or tails of.
Yeah, and Ishamael really knows how to push the button too, with saying, what is it? Does he say the more wolf you become, the more you're mine?
Yeah. Whether it's true or not, that's going to sit on Perrin's conscience for a long time to come. It's going to create a fear of connecting to his inner self out of the fear that it will further connect him to the dark.
That it's going to make him second guess everything he does, and on top of that, it's going to make him less of so if Perrin decides peace is the option, then he's essentially taken himself off the playing board. He's no longer a problem for Ishamael if Perrin is just like, kumbaya, nonviolence.
Right.
Like, that's it.
No, and like it's actually like a really good way to attack this from like the psychological attack perspective is if you can neutralize Perrin with fear like this early on in the game, you've really kind of created a non-issue out of him. This is a little bit off topic, but it's still in that same scene, is when we're looking at like the Shan Chen and their use of the Damani. In this scene, they tote that woman out and then just basically use her like a gun.
It's like the cyclical nature of abuse.
Yeah.
Where it's like, not only are you a slave, but now you're a slave and you're going to help us enslave even more women.
No, that's the perfect way to put it.
It's such an interesting way that Robert Jordan brought this into the story because of, the conversations you can have about like someone deciding, hey, this land is ours now, we're taking it, and we own this land. You are ours now. You'll do what we say, and you now become a part of the Shanshan Empire, which is very, very much a like
The imperialism is at 11.
yeah, very much a nod to the history of America, which I think Robert Jordan just did not try to hide that at all.
No, I would agree there completely.
I mean, the Shanshan even have a southern draw in the books, which is hilarious.
Yeah, that's real. Oh, it would be so much harder to take that all in with a southern accent because it's so friendly sounding. Even when they're shading you with the God bless.
Right?
Like even the shade still has a tone of friendliness in it.
Yeah, I love that scene where the speaker for the High Lady Suroth is like, when the lands of Arthur Pandrag. It's like, they did it. They did it.
Something I kind of skipped over was like in this whole same arc throughout this episode is earlier in the episode, Perrin is exposed to the brutality of the Shanshan's unique culture.
Mm-hmm.
Lady Suroth is up on her mobile throne. We see Uno try and stand up against the forcible enslavement. And, we see what happens. She has that little horn on the bottom of her mobile throne room for a reason. And in that moment, you can really see like how appalled and the visceral emotional response that Perrin has to that. Even like by kind of refusing to kneel until he's like kind of told like, this isn't worth you dying right now. Chill, get on your knees, do what they want, not worth dying.
Live to fight another day.
Who Perrin is, he wants to stand up against this type of brutality and aggression and an oppression of others. But sometimes Perrin forgets that like dying in the name of standing up for it may not actually be what's best for everybody long term.
Right. How do you feel about Uno doing what he did? Too brash, or was it honorable? Like what are your thoughts?
I think it's really like on brand for Uno. Okay. And while it sucks to have like a loved character leave a show or a story, I really couldn't picture him as a character bending the knee and swearing fealty.
Okay. Yeah. Agreed. I remember when I think there were some behind the scenes images dropped, or maybe might have been like a little reel, like a little sizzle reel, but they showed Uno kind of being like shoved to his knees. And the speculation from everyone was, is he going to die? Is he going to live? And is this him being like cowed into swearing the oaths? And the question was, is Uno the type of guy who would do it? And I remember being asked, do you think he would swear the oaths? And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think he's going to die. I think this means he's dead. Because in my mind, I couldn't picture him being like, yeah, yes, okay, fine. Even begrudgingly,
Right. And I mean, nor can I picture Lady Suroth letting that kind of thing go.
The way that he spits and she just has that like kind of twitch of her lips, like just a hint of a frown. That was really well done to be able to emote through all of that facial covering.
Right.
If we go back to Ishi talking to Perrin in the wagon, I love how Ishamael just kind of like waltzes on out the door like nothing is a problem.
It was like, all right, bud, we're done chatting. See you later.
Yeah, and then as soon as Ishamael is out the door, you have Elias, who is holding on to a bar above the door and just like smashes through with his feet in the most theatrical way. It was such a fun moment because you have Ishi, who is just like composed, calm, just like, see you later. And then Elias like barging in like, aha, and there's no one there.
Yeah, I really like the part where Elias busts in and he's like, you gotta go. And this, what's the wolf's name? I forgot.
Hopper.
he's like, follow Hopper, he'll take you where you need to go. And then he rushes back in to keep fighting with the other wolves. And I think
Yeah.
that kind of highlights how deep the bond between like the wolf bond is for the people who, what are they called? Like, I forgot.
A wolf brother,
Okay,
or
yeah.
like wolfkin, I guess.
So like it really kind of works to establish how deep the bond is between the wolfkin and the wolves.
Yeah, I like that you brought it up last week about the bond and how it feels similar with the Aes Sedai Warder bond. And I think in a way you're absolutely correct. The only difference I would say is that the wolf bond isn't something that has anything to do with the one power. It's in this world like an old magic, like older than, like it's so old nobody knows how it came into existence or what it's even about. It's kind of like this dying thing, unlike channelers who, kind of pop up everywhere.
Right. I think that there are some ways that it's definitely different from a warder bond, in which it seems to be a much more mutual bond between the wolves and the wolfkin, versus like you can't force that bond between them. You can force a bond between an Aes Sedai and a warder.
The wolf brother bond is kind of just like something in nature. Since seeing this fight break down between the Shan-Chen and the Damani and the wolves, those wolves came in and they destroyed them. Like they had channelers even, and those wolves were taking people down left and right.
Yeah.
So
it was like every wolf in the area got the signal and came rushing in.
yeah, that's one of the things I'm really excited for. Hopefully, this show progresses for more seasons, because there are some big battles where if Perrin has the ability to do what Elias can do and send out to the wolves, your army just got much bigger, much bigger.
Right. Absolutely. That bolsters your infantry defense line at an incredible rate.
Yeah. Maybe as I watch this season, it'll jog my memory, because I don't remember not if this happened, but the wolves hate Trollocs and they hate any of the shadow spawn. They would rather fight to the death rather than just walk away. They hear of Trollocs in the area and it's like blood sport for them. They're into it.
It's interesting that Ishi was like, the more wolf you become, the more you're mine, when it seems like the wolves themselves are kind of inherently anti-creatures of the dark.
Absolutely. I think this works really well for Ishamael because all knowledge of this wolf brother connection is seemingly lost. Like at this point in time, nobody should know what this is except for maybe someone like a Varen might know.
Right.
Or someone like Elias who can explain it further. But a lot of people don't even know it exists, doesn't know Elias exists and what he's capable of. They call him a sniffer. They think he's just a tracker. But in reality, he's something very different.
Right.
So he's kind of hiding in plain sight.
But working as a tracker works like as a really good cover for what's happening. You know, how I was talking about Ishamael, it seems like Ishamael, out of anybody, would actually have this knowledge. And it almost feels like when you tell me that the wolves are inherently hateful of creatures of the dark, that he knows that, but he's banking on Perrin not knowing that. And if he can psychologically trick Perrin into slowing his own progress as a wolfkin, then he really kind of like puts Perrin off into the not something to worry about right now category.
Oh, that's a great point. So that's the third point to Ishamael's trickery. Keep him separated from the wolves. Yeah.
If he can keep Perrin afraid of exploring his wolf bond more, then he can keep Perrin from becoming a problem down the line, or at least greatly slow the progress.
Yeah, that's great. I like that. Where do we want to move to next?
Should we talk about Rand at this point? And then we'll have like the Egwene and Nynaeve stuff for the end.
Yeah.
In this, with Rand, we're really seeing a lot more of like his relationship with Selene, and it really hinting at possible complications and ulterior motives on her part. Granted, anybody who's already seen the show, read the books, knows that that's absolutely true, but they're already foreshadowing that she is not who she seems.
What would you say the main tells are this episode?
I would say some of the tells are she's too calm in some ways.
Her inn burns down and
Yeah,
she's just kind
she's
of like,
chilling. She's chilling about that inn burning down. Also, when she was like, oh, you need this super special wine, let's sneak into this ultra posh party and steal it.
Right? How did she get an invite?
How does she have the connections for any of this? And as we find out, it's because she's Lanfear, and it might be more based around sourcing power than actually having connections. And just like a complete lack of fear. Because what's the worst that's going to happen to her? She's caught and she has to kill some people. That's like a Tuesday for her.
What did you think about the coat that she sources for Rand out of nowhere?
I think it goes again to either prove that she's super powerful in magic or she has a lot of money that she's not letting on to, which I could see that the Forsaken themselves would have access to great wealth because lots of them are thousands of years old. The idea that they would not be amassing wealth is ridiculous.
Yeah, and also we know later on that there are dark friends within the upper class of Kyrian, so she could have any dark friend she wants as a benefactor, it seems like.
Well, yeah, and at some level they answer to her.
Right. I wonder if they tithe, like
Oh my
the dark
gosh.
friend to Lanfear tithing.
I gotta say, like, if she's not doing it, she should have been. What's
Absolutely.
a little racketeering and extortion at this point?
That's nothing for a Forsaken.
In the scenes with Rand, we also see how much he's struggling with his identity as the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah, especially in these scenes with Logain.
Yeah.
I love Logain being like, out with it. Did you finally come here to ask me what you've been wanting to ask? And Miranda's like, oh, shucks, and I don't know what you're talking about.
Rand comes rushing back in with that wine in the middle of the night, obviously thinking that this is the actual barter. And then he finds out that it's not, that this is just more insane demands from a man who is losing his mind.
Yeah, Rand should be really scared right now knowing what he knows about male channelers and seeing it presented right in front of him, his face.
I have to assume that it does weigh on him, though.
He's having these nightmares too, and which is what leads to the burning of the inn and him accidentally channeling. And I think this season was more to kind of focus in on the anxiety and the fears and the manipulations of everyone coming from him from different sides, wanting different things when he can't even control himself.
I would agree with that completely. I do think that the way that they're playing it out right now helps to highlight the tension between Rand's desire for normalcy and the inevitability of his role as the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah, it's coming.
Yeah.
There's nothing he can do.
Exactly. But like in that moment where the inn's burning down and he's like laying in the bed and he's like looking around like, did I do this? I think that that's like one of those moments where we see his desire for normalcy.
Yeah.
But it's also like highlighting the inevitability of who he is and how important it is that he gets a handle on it.
Do you think that any of his nightmares were actually triggered by Lanfear? Did you ever get that sense watching or no?
When I think about it now, I could see how that could be a thing, but I don't think that it naturally triggered for me.
I think that's something people are questioning. Like, did Lanfear kind of speed this process along of kind of forcing him to come to grips with what he's capable of and a little chaos?
Like, she's quite the master of Tel'aran'rhiod, right?
Yeah, I believe Moghedien is the only one who's a level up above Lanfear.
Well, I mean, if she can do that, what's to stop her from just infiltrating and impressing her wishes upon his dreams?
Nothing, really.
Exactly.
I guess her own morals, which
she doesn't have.
I think Lanfear is a very funny character. I don't think that she's meant to be funny, but I do love that there's one Forsaken who's pretty much only out there for themselves in that way. Some people question, would she be a dark friend if she had the love of this person?
Ah, the age-old, why didn't Luce Theron love me?
I love how they're getting down to it in this episode, and she's like, no, 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 leave the coat on, because that's the Luz Theron coat. Like that's the dragon,
Oh,
the
shit,
red.
it is.
It's the red dragon coat.
Ah, okay.
Or it just reminds her of Luz Theron, the powerful, esteemed Age of Legends, like
Well,
beloved figure.
with how much I know that she loved Luce Theron to, such an unhealthy degree, it's not surprising that she would be weird about it.
I wonder if she could just channel like a coat.
It's
And
all
she was like,
very,
this is exactly like the one that he wore when he took me on that date one time in the Age of Legends.
it's got it puts the lotion on the skin vibes to it. Like, this was her Buffalo Bill moment.
I'm just picturing Rand sweeping up the ashes of the inn, and like a Goodbye Horses is playing in the background.
That would be perfect. That would have been a perfect outro.
Yeah, I was really excited to see Logain show back up. I know he's teased last episode, but I think this actor is incredible. I loved his cold open in season 1 probably the most,
Ooh, okay.
where he's just strutting around in the middle of a war, talking to his imaginary friends.
Peacocking.
Yeah. What did you think about the little sidebar he has with Rand when he's explaining, when I was caged in Tarvalin, I saw you. Like, that's why I was laughing.
When you see it, it's not surprising, because if you remember that episode, which I do, he is eyes locked, dead staring.
Yeah.
So when he's talking about how I can see that little shimmery glimmer around you, he's telling the truth, because I can specifically remember that, like the parade that's happening in Tarvalin, and he's being, toted in by the Reds, and Matt and Rand are up on that Juliet balcony kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he's just dead staring up at Rand. I will say, I don't know as though telling somebody I remember you in such an unhinged manner is exactly going to be making you friends or earning you trust, but crazy characters are going to be crazy.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that Logain is just kind of all over the place mentally right now, because had him and Rand been able to just kind of vibe out and be real with one another, and there was no like maniacal cackling and riddles involved and side quests, I have to assume this is exactly why Moiraine got these two characters in the same location, because she was hoping that somehow they would find their way to one another. Who knows, maybe Moiraine even got him the job at this place on purpose, and not just put him in the city, but she had a scheme of her own going on, which is so Moiraine. But if Rand was able to have these conversations with Logain, I think he would be able to come to terms with who he is, and he would have been able to kind of harness his abilities a little bit more.
Okay, I would agree with that.
So I could see this being a Moiraine ploy through and through, every layer perfectly crafted. But it's been such a long time since I've watched the season. It's good to go back, because now I'm like, does this get answered? I think maybe it does. We'll see.
We'll see. See, we're still pretty early in.
Should we get to the test and the arches?
Yes, absolutely. What a time. What a time.
First thoughts, I love seeing Matt in a new outfit. He's got a great horse. Another standout moment. These trials in the arches are designed to put the novice in front of their worst fears. Thoughts?
So when you look at like the tests themselves, they kind of fit into a what was, what is, what will be.
Mm-hmm.
Very much like, what's that, like Christmas fairy tale, Ebony?
Yes.
Yeah, it's got that kind of feel to it. I would say, though, that in the show specifically, the arches feel much more like a crucible. They're a harrowing transformation that strips Nynaeve of her defenses. And we see that with every single like turn she takes through the arches.
She needs to channel to be able to save people in the way that she wants to save them. Nynaeve is a healer through and through. She wants to heal and protect, and she can't do that effectively if she can't channel.
Yeah, so like when you talk about healing and protecting, it's interesting because I took what was the first arch as her life in the Two Rivers, it being a simpler existence tied to her roots and her identity as a healer. And then when we look at what is the second arch, we have more of an exemplification of her deep-seated fears of failure and loss, especially when it comes to protecting those she loves.
Right.
But then we move on to what will be. And I think that this personally was obviously the most harrowing test for her. And this is where she's given a glimpse of a possible future where she has everything she's ever wanted. She has love, family, peace, but she must make the decision to walk away from it. So we see her at the end of that third arch. The loss of Lan and their child isn't just a fear for her, it's a deep longing and vulnerability that she rarely acknowledges. And the arches have forced her to reject that life and step back into the harsh reality of her life at the tower. So they're not only testing her courage, but also her ability to choose duty over personal like desire and happiness.
Yeah, it's forcing her to make that choice in a way.
Absolutely.
Do you walk away from Lan peace, like you said, or do you stay and become a weapon?
Yeah, I think that
That's scary. That's scary.
it is. And I think that the trials say a lot about her, like by highlighting some of her greatest strengths and weaknesses, like her strength being that unwavering sense of duty and responsibility. And we see it when she walks away from the life she wanted in the arches because she feels compelled to serve a higher purpose. Weakness/flaw side of things is like her deep unresolved grief and fear of loss. And these aren't just challenges that she overcomes, they really define her.
In that aspect, I think that's really well done from the show's aspect, their interpretation of the books, because I think essentially when you break Nynaeve down as a character, she does want two things. She wants to protect and heal and always be there for the people who she cares about, but also she does want to be a channeler. She wants to succeed in this because then she can go back to step one, be the best healer, savior, protector she possibly can.
Right.
So it's kind of just like, the snake eating its tail.
The Ouroboros of it all.
Yeah. It's interesting because these arches are used not just for the accepted test, but when you test to become an Aes Sedai, you have to go through them again. And in the books, it's not just like face your fears. It's you have other Aes Sedai on the outside putting in weaves to construct a situation for you to overcome, which makes it pretty dark, I would say.
That's something that's good to bring up, though, because I know that the arches are a little bit different in the show than they are in the books. So, like, in the show, a question that I have is this the only place where the Trial of the Arches can be performed? Because the show version of the arches seems to almost replicate a rift in space-time that employs time dilation. You walk through the arch, and it moves you into, like, an alternate branch of the timeline.
Yeah, because Nynaeve was in there for years. She had a whole life, a grown child.
But much like as you get closer to the event horizon of a black hole, in this, it's time dilating.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't know as though that's necessarily the case in the books, right? This is like kind of a show-specific aspect.
We don't really know because the books, we don't actually see any other accepted tests in the books.
Okay.
Except for, you know what? No, we don't. We hear of them, but
don't actually see them.
We don't actually get that POV like through the arches.
Interesting.
Some people really like trying to figure out what the Age of Legends use for the arches was.
Okay. Oh, all right.
Some people think it's like exposure therapy.
Interesting.
Going through the arches, facing the things you're most afraid of. So when you come back out, it's lessened. That fear is lessened.
Okay. That makes me think of like the mirror dimension from Doctor Strange.
Some people think that they're just a kind of like VR used improperly.
All right. Like an AI hallucination.
Like you could use it for entertainment if you wanted.
Oh, okay. They just don't.
Well, that's the thing. Like the Aes Sedai, it's so old they don't know what it is. So they just were like, "Hey, we found this thing. We're gonna study it." And then once they figured out what it can do, they started using it as a part of their test, I guess.
Huh.
Which makes it infinitely more dangerous.
It does.
Feeling.
Now that you say that, I'm like, that's infinitely more reckless.
Because they're like, we don't know. Like some come in, some don't come out. Some come in like fine and get stabbed within and come out without a scratch. Some people need healing when they come out. Is different. We don't know. And it's like, should we be using this, you think?
I mean, the Aes Sedai as a whole are kind of obsessed with the idea of inner strength. So it's not surprising to me that they would subject like the accepted to these tests to make sure that they fit those parameters of inner strength and resilience.
Yeah. Who do we have for the ChatGPT psych evals this week?
Okay, this week we have, in case anybody doesn't know, I have been taking characters from episodes and then having ChatGPT do armchair psychiatric diagnosis of them. It's been a real delight so far. Our options this week are Min Farshaw, Logain Alar, Swan Sanche, and Lady Surath.
Oh, let's do Min.
Okay. Presentation. Min is pragmatic, introspective, and highly perceptive, often serving as a grounding force for others. Her unique ability to see visions of people's future deeply influences her perspective on life and relationships, making her both resigned to fate and occasionally burdened by it. Diagnoses. Existential anxiety. Min struggles with the implications of her ability, as seeing unavoidable glimpses of the future creates a sense of helplessness and existential unease. This often manifests as cynicism or emotional detachment. Adjustment disorder with depressive features. Her reluctance to fully embrace her role in the larger conflict around her could stem from difficulty processing the possibilities and pressures of her unique abilities. Considerations. Min's skepticism about authority and her blunt demeanor serve as a defense against the emotional toll of her visions. Her strong self-awareness and desire for independence make her resilient, but her ability often isolates her emotionally, as few understand her burden.
I think that's pretty on point. I think what really got me interested was the existentialism of it all, because
how would that not be a problem?
Right. If you're constantly being bombarded by like, this is going to happen, but you can't do anything. To me, that would be so up at odds with like, do I actually have any free will, or am I just a slave to the pattern?
I think this sounds like a really good read of her, even with the minuscule amount of contact I've had with her as a character.
Yeah. We see later on that Ishamael really exploits that and exploits her.
Yeah. I do want to say that there is a caveat to today's features, because as all of these people are either secondary or tertiary characters, I had to tell ChatGPT that it was also allowed to pull from the books and not just the show.
Yeah, but I think even though with that caveat, I think it still lines up really well.
Yeah, I do too.
Who do you want to do next?
I really think Lady Surath deserves a turn of the wheel.
Okay.
So, presentation. Lady Surath is cunning, calculating, and ruthless, embodying the Seanchan's hierarchies, rigid structure, and their brutal authoritarian worldview. She balances her political ambitions with strict adherence to the Seanchan's belief system, showing no hesitation to manipulate, dominate, or destroy others to maintain her power and position. Her diagnosis is, I'm just going to tell you, it's a beast. Antisocial personality disorder, ASPD. Lady Surath exhibits a blatant disregard for others' rights and feelings consistent with ASPD. Her manipulative tendencies, lack of empathy, and willingness to inflict harm for personal gain reflect this disorder. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Her adherence to the rigid Seanchan system, her obsessive need for control, and her meticulous nature in enforcing cultural norms suggest OCPD traits. She views the Seanchan hierarchy hierarchy and her place within it as absolute, with no room for deviation. Narcissistic personality disorder.
Whoa. It just keeps
It
going.
does. Narcissistic personality disorder. Her grandiose self-image, belief in her inherent superiority as Ascension Noble, and entitlement to power align with NPD traits. She expects deference from others and sees herself above reproach. Considerations. Lady Surat's loyalty to the Shan Chen philosophy reflects her indoctrinations within their rigid culture, which reinforces her lack of empathy for others, especially non-Shan Chen. Her calculated cruelty and political maneuvering may stem from her fear of losing status within the Shan Chen hierarchy, as failure or dissent could lead to catastrophic personal consequences. Her adherence to order may be both a personal trait and a survival strategy. Lady Surat is a fascinating case of someone whose personality disorders are amplified and reinforced by their cultural context, making her both a product of her environment and a dangerous, self-serving individual.
That's good, because it really gets into the question of what would she be like if she wasn't in this environment.
Turns out she'd probably still have ASPD, but it seems as though she wouldn't have the reach to inflict oppression and harm the way she does.
Right. I'm thinking about the scene later in the season where she gets her nails chopped off, and the not just embarrassment, but the absolute, like, unwavering disgust that she feels of being beneath someone. And we see it later too, where she starts kind of telling Ishamael what he needs to do. And he's like, hey now, little lady, you got to remember how this partnership works, right?
Yeah, coming at Ishii all bossy like, I feel like would be about the worst laid plan.
Yeah. So with this readout, I'm definitely going to be looking at her actions throughout the rest of the season through a lens. Like, she does have that little show that she puts on later too, where she forces Loyal to sing for everyone with that, like, tree singing.
An absolute war crime.
But again, it's just like she's reveling in the domination.
Absolutely. She really seems to enjoy forcing people to do things that are inherently antagonistic. Forcing a builder to sing it's horrific, and she knows it.
I think that scene too, there's an interesting tell, because when Loyal's singing, everyone's kind of like in awe of it, like, wow, this is great, majestic, like, what an amazing thing to be witnessing. And she puts a stop to it immediately because she needs to be in that spot of spotlight.
Yeah, it did seem to kind of take the enjoyment of the forcing him to do something that she knows very deeply is against his culture. But then when it worked, she wasn't able to revel in everybody looking at her like, ooh, you got him, you forced him. Everybody was like, wow, this is so beautiful.
It definitely changed the vibes in the room.
Yeah, she
couldn't handle it.
Do you think we should round it out with Logains?
Yeah, why not?
All right,
why
we'll
not?
do one more. Logain. Presentation. Logain is charismatic, ambitious, and initially driven by his belief that he is the Dragon Reborn. After being gentled, he becomes withdrawn and despondent, struggling to find meaning in life without his connection to the One Power. Diagnosis. Narcissistic traits of grandiosity and purpose-driven. Logain's belief in his own destiny and his ability to rally followers suggests narcissistic tendencies, though they are tempered by genuine leadership abilities and a sense of a greater purpose. Major depressive disorder. Following his gentling, Logain exhibits classic symptoms of depression, including hopelessness, emotional withdrawal, and a diminished sense of self-worth. His power was central to his identity, and losing it devastates him. Post-traumatic stress disorder. His experiences as a false dragon, imprisonment, and gentling leave deep psychological scars, contributing to flashbacks and a profound sense of loss. Considerations. Logain's resilience is evident by his eventual recovery and ability to find new meaning. However, his path is marked by intense internal conflict as he reconciles his past ambitions with his reduced role in the world.
Yeah, this is a tricky one because I feel like I can't go too far into it without, like, major book spoilers, but I think what it's laid out is pretty on point.
Yeah, it seems that way. Even though I haven't had a lot of experience with Logain, the part about saying that he has narcissistic traits but not necessarily narcissism,
Yeah.
I think is a really good distinction to make with him.
Yeah, I mean, he came from a place where he had a king fighting for him, and he was able to turn that king around to be like, "No, you're right. You are the one. I will follow you." So to come from that to being stripped of your magical capabilities, which, as we know in this world, is essentially a death sentence because of the depression that follows, all of that to now.
Yeah, but they don't just strip him of his capabilities. They strip him of his capabilities and then they strip him of his autonomy by putting him in a psych ward.
Yes. I think this is always one of those questionable things too, because when you talk about what do you do with male channelers who are losing their minds, who are like suffering under the madness of this corruption of the one power, what do you do with them? What is the most humane way to deal with it? And there's not a good answer, but there's
No,
not a lot of options.
no, really, the most humane thing seems to be euthanizing them, but that's not necessarily humane from the context of why it's happening.
Right. And I think there's something interesting how in the books, like different cultures will do different things to their male channelers. Like the Aiel, when they realize, uh-oh, like I'm a man, I can channel, they pretty much go off on a one-man mission into the Blight to just kill as many shadow spawn as possible and just go out fighting.
That's very noble.
Very noble. I think, the Red Aja, they just pretty much like magically castrate them, which leads to death 100% of the time. It's a question of when rather than if. I believe that some cultures send. Is this right? I could be misremembering. I think some cultures send their male channelers to like an island. Did I make that up? Did I dream
God,
that?
I hope you didn't because that sounds fun.
Just a bunch of dudes on an island
Yeah, it sounds
channeling.
very Hunger Games.
It does. It does.
If Lady Suroth really wanted to like flex her might as an imperialistic authoritarian, she would be hosting Hunger Games for male channelers.
Oh, God.
She really could be doing a much better job of being a maniacal villain.
Yeah, yeah. Male Chandler Hunger Games just fucking took me out, though.
Oh, I'm here for it. We should just build our own.
I feel like that might be what the Sea Folk do.
Okay, can't wait to learn about them.
I don't remember what the Tuatha'an do.
I feel like it's not going to be a Hunger Games situation.
Right? No, unfortunately, there is no answer to that question.
Damn.
Only conjecture. But if you're listening and you have an idea what you think they would do with them, tell us. I would very much like to know. Okay. So this wraps up this episode. Make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss more of these episodes and any of my other Wheel of Time discussion, breakdown, speculation, news videos. Join us next week and we will see you then.